The Great Pyramid of Giza is aligned to true north. It's incredibly precise. And this was done without any modern tools. No satellites, no computer, they didn't even have a magnetic compass. So how did they do it? There was a method, a celestial method. They used the night sky. This technique is what we're going to look at. How you take the rotation of the stars and turn that into a square foundation on the ground. And the tool they used was simple. It created a line. A reference line accurate to a fraction of a degree, that's the key. That precision from 4,500 years ago, it makes you reconsider what was possible. What that kind of ambition actually means. The pyramid was a sacred machine. A cosmic, it had one monumental purpose. It wasn't just a tomb for the king's body. It was a vessel to launch his spirit into an eternal cycle, to join the stars. That was the entire point. And in their view, direction was destiny. The north held a unique significance. The east was where the sun was reborn each morning. That meant life and renewal. But the north represented something more permanent, the realm of the unchanging. High in the northern sky, the stars never rose and never set. They just turned, a slow, endless circle around a fixed point, the celestial pole. To the Egyptians, this was the imperishable region, the domain of deities. The eternal souls of the pharaohs joined them there. So a pyramid aligned to true north was anchored to that circuit, physically and spiritually anchored. Its sides pointed directly to that timeless, revolving realm. It was a permanent tether. It meant the pharaoh's spirit wouldn't wander lost. It would be locked onto the correct celestial pathway. For his journey, that was the driving imperative. The precision wasn't for architectural vanity. It was a theological requirement, an engineering requirement for eternal salvation. The stakes couldn't have been higher. That's why they pursued an accuracy that bridged the gap. Between the earthly and the divine, the problem was one of celestial geometry, translating the turning motion of the stars into a single line on the desert floor. The answer came from a specific observation, a pair of stars that never left the sky. Ancient astronomers watched them circle that invisible pole. Their names were, and for the Egyptians, these were fixed markers in the imperishable region. Their predictable motion held the secret. The method is called the simultaneous transit. Imagine a clear night over Giza long ago. An observer stands at the future site. They have a simple tool, a vertical plumb line, a weight on a string hanging straight down. This creates a local reference against the turning sky. They watch and wheel around the pole. The key moment is when these two stars line up vertically, one directly above the other, both bisected by the plumb bob string. In that instant, they've captured something. The line from their eye through the string to those aligned stars. It defines a true north-south meridian, a snapshot of cosmic geometry. The stars are so distant their alignment points to the celestial pole, and so to true north on the ground. This wasn't a one-night endeavor. It required patience, generations of knowledge. The celestial pole itself shifts over, a slow wobble called precession. So the perfect alignment of these specific stars was only possible for a limited time, a window that coincides almost exactly with the Great Pyramid's construction. The technique needed no advanced technology, only a deep intimacy with the night sky, an act of precise witnessing. By marking that event on the ground, they anchored their construction to the axis of the heavens. The line was drawn, but a line is only the beginning. Taking that one perfect meridian and expanding it into the square, massive foundation a pyramid requires. A single line in the sand is a promise, but it's not a pyramid. The problem was scale. How do you take that alignment, that moment with a string and the stars, and make it permanent across hundreds of meters? The tool was simple. It was called the Merkhet, a horizontal bar. From its center hung a plumb line, a weight on a string, and it worked with another tool, the bay, a sighting rod with a forked end. Together they were like a basic theodolite. So after finding north-south from the stars, the astronomer would set up the Merkhet. He'd orient it so the plumb line hung over a mark on the ground. That mark was the line, and the bar itself became an east-west axis, perpendicular to the sacred direction. But the projection, that was the key. With the Merkhet fixed, the observer would look through the fork of the bay toward the horizon. An assistant would walk far out holding a marker, a stake. The observer would guide him left or right until the assistant, the marker, and the plumb line all lined up. A shout. The assistant drives the stake. That's it. They transferred a celestial angle to a point on the earth. Do it again in the opposite direction. You get a second point. Stretch a line between them. That's your baseline. Hundreds of cubits long, etched into the desert floor. the accuracy is hard to believe. The Merkhet was minimal, no gears, no lenses, just gravity and line of sight and repetition. It didn't just measure the land, it translated the cosmos. Each stake was an echo of the original star alignment, a point of contact between the moving stars and the fixed Earth. With that grid, the square footprint could be laid out, each corner pointing true. But laying out the corners is one thing. Keeping that precision as the structure rises course by course, that's another challenge entirely. They drove a stake into the ground where the observer stood. Then they looked along the meridian through the sighting tool, and they guided an assistant to walk north. The assistant would go as far as the eye could see clearly, maybe a few hundred cubits, and plant a second stake right on that invisible line. So now they had 2 points in the desert, connected by a thread of celestial geometry. The next tool was humble but perfect. A length of cord made from woven flax or palm fiber soaked in water to remove any stretch. Workers would tie it tightly between the 2 stakes, pulling it until it hummed with tension. But a taut cord can still sag in the middle, bowing down toward the earth. That curve would introduce an error, a tiny bend in their celestial road. So they used water, the oldest and truest level. They dug shallow trenches parallel to the cord and filled them with water. Or they used simple wooden A-frames with a plumb line. And by adjusting the height of the cord's supports until it ran perfectly parallel to the still water's surface, they eliminated the sag. They created a line that was not just straight, but truly horizontal across that distance. This cord singing with tension was the baseline, the master reference. Every other measurement for the pyramid's gigantic square would spring from this one line. Think of the consequence. A mistake here, a deviation of just 1 part in 1,000 would not stay small. It would be, over the length of a pyramid's side, nearly 230 meters, that tiny error would become a gap you could see. The corners wouldn't meet, the faces would twist, the celestial anchor would slip. So this moment with cord and water and stakes was an act of profound focus, where abstract astronomy met the grit of engineering. The grand vision was now committed to the Earth. One careful stake at a time, the sky gave them more than one kind of clock. The stars were a nightly fixed reference. The sun was a daily moving one. And the Egyptians, masters of celestial observation, would have used it too. Which brings us to another principle, the gnomon, the science of casting shadows. You take a simple vertical rod, plant it firmly in the ground. As the sun arcs across the sky, the rod's shadow sweeps out a path. It's a basic sundial. But for an ancient surveyor, that shadow held geometric secrets. The method is logical. In the morning, with the sun rising in the east, the shadow points west. You mark the very tip of that long, fading shadow. Then you wait. You watch the shadow shorten, turn, and then begin to lengthen again toward the east as the sun sets. In the afternoon, you mark the tip once more, at a point where it's the same length as it was in the morning. Now you have 2 marks on the ground. They aren't aligned north-south. They create a wide arc, a curve traced by the sun's journey. The crucial step is to find the midpoint between them. A line drawn from the base of the rod through that central point will run almost perfectly true north and south. It's a method of bisecting an angle created by the sun itself. It's susceptible to small errors from the bending of sunlight in the atmosphere. What it lacks in stellar precision, it makes up for in accessibility and speed. You don't need a perfectly clear night. You just need a sunny day and a steady hand. This solar technique reveals a holistic mindset. The builders weren't relying on a single, fragile truth. They were cross-checking their work. The imperishable stars gave them their primary, unwavering line. The traveling sun provided a daily, practical verification. It was a system of celestial redundancy. If the line from the stars and the line from the sun agreed, confidence was absolute. If there was a slight discrepancy, it prompted a recheck, a refinement under the next clear night sky. This interplay between sun and star points to a deeper understanding. They saw the cosmos as an integrated mechanism, a grand machine with multiple harmonious indicators. Their goal wasn't just to find north. It was to confirm it again and again, using every tool the heavens provided. That relentless pursuit of verification is what turned a theoretical alignment into a physical reality of staggering accuracy. With their orientation locked in from multiple celestial sources, the foundation was truly set. But a perfect square on the ground is just the beginning. Precision is a process of refinement. That first line from the stars, checked against the sun's path, was already a masterpiece. But they probably didn't stop there. To push that accuracy from remarkable to nearly perfect, they might have used a fifth principle. A geometric trick, later called the Indian circle method. It moves beyond marking into a kind of self-correction. Picture their gnomon, that vertical rod, standing on the prepared site. They take a cord, tie it to the base, and sweep out a large, perfect circle in the sand around it. As the sun rises, the long morning shadow eventually touches that circle. They mark that point. Then they wait. Through the day, the shadow shrinks, swings around, and lengthens again. In the afternoon, when the shadow's tip meets the circle's edge a second time, they make another mark. So now there are 2 points on the circumference, and the next step is the beauty of it. You don't need to find the center of the sun's arc. You just draw a straight line between those 2 marks on the circle. That line is a chord. Find the exact midpoint of that chord and draw a new line from the gnomon's base through that midpoint. That new line points true north. This is powerful because it cancels errors. If the ground isn't level or the gnomon isn't perfectly vertical, those flaws affect both the morning and afternoon marks equally. The circle's geometry corrects for them. The bisector still finds the true meridian. This isn't just observation. It's applied mathematics. It shows a mindset that expected imperfection in the physical world and used pure geometry to overcome it. It suggests the builders weren't just priests watching the sky. They were engineers solving a problem, creating a system that could check itself. With that final refinement, the theoretical line from the cosmos became a physical line on the ground of almost unimaginable fidelity. The orientation was complete, but a perfectly aligned square is just a footprint. The true test was building upward, layer by mountainous layer, without letting that celestial anchor drift by a single finger's width. The celestial line was there, marked in the desert. That was the promise of true north. But the ground itself couldn't be trusted. The Giza Plateau wasn't a smooth slate. It was ancient bedrock, weathered, uneven, dips and rises. Before any pyramid stone could be laid, this whole site had to be transformed. So they began one of the most audacious acts of site preparation ever. They weren't just clearing sand. They were sculpting the earth, creating a near-perfect horizontal plane across an area larger than 10 football fields. That leveling wasn't optional. It was the absolute prerequisite. Think of it like drawing a perfect square on a tilted table. That square is only perfect relative to the table's slope. From any other angle, it's a rhombus. The same principle applied. Any undulation in the bedrock would distort the celestial alignments catastrophically. The pyramid sides might point true north from the base, but if the base was slanted, the whole structure would be canted. Its geometry compromised before it even rose a single course. So how do you level several acres of solid limestone? With copper tools, stone hammers, human labor. The answer again came from water. They carved a grid of shallow trenches across the entire site, filled them with water, a network of interconnected channels. Water, when still, finds its own level with unerring accuracy. By measuring down from the surface of this water at countless points, workers knew exactly how much rock to remove. It was a giant living spirit level. Teams would chip and pound the high points down, constantly checking against the water's calm surface, until the entire plateau was reduced to a uniform plane. The precision they achieved is staggering. Across the entire base of the Great Pyramid, the bedrock is leveled to within just over 2 centimeters, less than an inch of variation over such a vast area. This preparatory work forces a shift in perspective. The pyramid's legendary accuracy wasn't a single stroke of genius. It was a chain of interlocking triumphs. The celestial observation gave them direction. The water-filled trenches gave them a true plane. One was useless without the other. This leveling operation underscores a truth about the project. It was an exercise in controlling error at every stage. From the stars to the stone, they understood perfection in the heavens had to be matched by perfection on the ground. That deviation is just 3/60ths of a degree. It's a tiny number, but it's real. It's a physical reality that still leaves engineers speechless. The west side of the Great Pyramid points to true north with an error you could cover with your thumb at arm's length. To get that, they had to execute every step of their method with near perfection. One misaligned stake, one sagging cord, one off-level trench, any of that would have into a visible flaw. And we don't see one. That tells us something. This wasn't a lucky guess. It was a repeatable process. It was honed into an exact science. Think about what that error margin means. A modern theodolite with lenses and precision gears might achieve that under ideal conditions. The builders of Khufu's pyramid did it with plumb lines and citing rods and cords of woven fiber. Their tools were extensions of their understanding, not replacements for it. Every observation of and every marking with the Merkhet, every leveling check with still water, it all had to be done with unwavering consistency. The Great Pyramid is the proof they could do it, not once, but consistently across a project that spanned decades. It stands as a silent witness to a standard of technical excellence, a standard that didn't have a name because for them, it was just the way things were done. This precision forces a shift in how we see the project. We often marvel at the scale, the millions of stones, but the true marvel is the control. Before a single block was set, the entire site was geometrically locked to the cosmos. The pyramid didn't just happen to be aligned. It was built from the ground up because it was aligned. That orientation was the first and most important stone, laid not with limestone but with astronomy. So in this specific case, we're not looking at an anomalous wonder. We're looking at a proof of concept, on a colossal scale. It shows their method wasn't theoretical, it was operational. It could withstand the chaos of a massive building site, the passing of seasons, the turnover of work crews. The alignment survived all of it, which means their system of knowledge transmission was as robust as their engineering. The precision of the Great Pyramid isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a message to be read, carved in geometry and granite, stating clearly that 4,500 years ago, human ambition could already touch the timeless. That celestial precision opens up other possibilities. If they could align to true north that exactly, what else might they have built into the work? It leads into a landscape of other theories, where alignment isn't just about a single direction, but a grand symbolic map. The most famous is the Orion correlation theory. Robert proposed it. He suggested the layout of the three main pyramids at Giza, Khufu, wasn't random. Their positions and sizes mirror the three stars of Orion's belt. In this view, the Nile River represented the Milky Way, so the entire Giza complex becomes a terrestrial model of the heavens. For the Egyptians, Orion was sacred. It was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth. Aligning the pyramids to mirror his celestial form would be a profound theological statement. It turns the Plateau into a machine for resurrection, an echo of the imperishable realm in stone. The theory is compelling because it speaks to a different alignment, relational, symbolic. It suggests the builders were thinking in constellations, not just pole stars. They might have been creating a permanent echo of a specific pattern, frozen at the moment of a pharaoh's departure. Other hypotheses look to different celestial events. Some point to alignments with solstice sunrises or sunsets, where the sun's extreme positions could mark sacred dates. The Sphinx gazes directly east, toward the rising sun on the spring equinox. That could indicate a solar alignment layered on top of the stellar one, a dual significance for different ceremonies. There are even theories connecting the pyramids to geographical features, seeing them as anchors within a sacred landscape that included the Nile and the horizon. Examining these ideas isn't about choosing one truth. It's about recognizing the likely complexity of the ancient Egyptian worldview. For a culture that saw no separation between earthly and divine, every decision, engineering, astronomical, religious, was part of a unified whole. The true north alignment served a precise, functional purpose for the pyramid's spiritual mechanics. A constellation correlation could have served a grand mythic purpose, connecting the pharaoh's destiny to a specific god. A solar alignment might have tied the structure to the cyclical time of seasons. These layers aren't mutually exclusive. They probably reinforced each other, creating a structure rich with meaning on multiple levels. This multi-layered thinking is what we often struggle to grasp. We look for the one technical solution, the single reason. But for the pyramid builders, reason and ritual, science and symbol were the same language. The precision of their astronomy gave power to their mythology, and the depth of their belief demanded that precision. So the method of the plumb line and the circumpolar stars explains the how. These other theories open windows into the why. They remind us we're not just studying ancient engineering. We're trying to decipher a lost cosmology, written not in words but in the silent geometry of stone against the sky. Behind every perfect line there was a person holding the plumb bob. That precision we see, it came from master surveyors. They were the elite, the astronomer priest, a class called the followers of Horus. Their role was both sacred and scientific. They weren't just builders, they were interpreters. Their task was to read the language of the stars and translate it into stone. They held the knowledge of the seasons, the movements of the imperishable stars, the geometry that linked Earth to heaven. Their authority came from a lifetime of observation, probably generations of it. You have to imagine the discipline. Night after night, year after year, watching the slow wheel of the circumpolar stars, noting their positions, the subtle shifts over decades. This wasn't a hobby. It was a sacred vocation, a form of devotion. Their expertise was their power, and it was carefully guarded. Passed down orally from master to apprentice. There were no textbooks for this, no written manuals. The knowledge lived in memory, in practiced hands, in the shared understanding of how to sight a star through the fork of a bay, how to tension a cord just so. Their names are lost. We don't know who stood on the Giza Plateau that night, who called out to set the final stake, but their identity is written in the result. That 4,500-year-old testimony of their skill is more permanent than any inscription. Considering these individuals changes the story. It turns the pyramids from impersonal monuments into the achievements of specific, skilled minds. It adds a layer of respect for the intellectual rigor, the dedication. This was a project managed by faith, but executed with a scientist's eye for detail. The followers of Horus understood that a pharaoh's eternal journey depended on the accuracy of their observations. A mistake in their calculations wasn't an engineering flaw. It was a theological catastrophe. That weight of responsibility must have been immense. It explains the obsessive redundancy, the cross-checking between sun and stars, the relentless pursuit of the perfect line. They weren't just working for a king, they were working for eternity itself. And in that silent, precise alignment, you can still sense their focus, their commitment to getting it right. They bridge the gap between the human and the heavenly not with magic but with meticulous, repeatable technique. Their legacy isn't just a pile of stones. It's a monument to the power of the human mind, to discern order in the cosmos and to imprint that order onto the earth. The Merkhet and Bay gave them their line to the stars. But that line had to cross the whole site, so they used trenches. Long, leveled trenches cut into the bedrock, then filled with water. On a calm night, that water became a mirror, a perfect flat plane. An observer could look down and see a star's reflection. And by lining up a rod so the real star met its reflection in his sight, he could fix a perfectly horizontal line to that star's path. The water canceled out any error in his own eye level. It doubled their accuracy. A simple trench became an instrument. For the right angles for squaring the foundation, they likely used a carpenter's square, but enormous. A giant wooden L align it with their north-south line, then used the 3-4-5 triangle to get the perpendicular. Measure 3 units one way, 4 the other. When the diagonal is exactly 5, the corner is 90 degrees. That's practical math. It doesn't matter if the wood warps a little or if a cord sags, the geometry holds. Then for the finish, the tools changed. The casing stones, the white shell that made the pyramid shine, needed a different precision. Copper chisels for rough shaping. But for the final fit, for joints so tight a blade couldn't slip through, they used simpler things. Dolerite pounders, granite hammers. They'd grind the limestone faces together with abrasive sand, polishing each surface until it was perfectly flat, perfectly angled. That's how the alignment held all the way to the top. Each casing stone was a facet of a giant gem, cut to reflect a kind of intention. So the whole toolkit shows something. It wasn't mystery or lost technology. It was a deep understanding of the physical world accumulated and then adapted. They took the principle of water finding level, the fact of a plumb line, the guarantee of a 3-4-5 triangle, and they scaled it up. Wood, stone, copper, water, cord, every tool answered a question. The pyramid's silent alignment is just the sum of those answers. The desert is quiet, but there's a kind of music in the numbers there. Those sides perfectly aligned, that square base flawless, it's speaking a language, geometry, older than writing. The builders watched the sky for sacred directions, but it was their control of shape, of angle and proportion that turned those lines into a mountain, a scale never seen before, and it all rested on principles that feel timeless, elegant. Take the right angle, a literal cornerstone. To get a perfect 90-degree corner from their north-south line, they didn't need modern tools. They needed a rule, unbreakable, the 3-4-5 triangle. Measure 3 units along one line, 4 along the other. When the diagonal between those points measures exactly 5, the corner is square. It's the Pythagorean theorem in practice centuries before Pythagoras. They didn't need to prove it abstractly. They just needed to know it worked. And it did. Absolutely, whether they were measuring with a knotted rope across the foundation or checking a casing stone. This was empirical knowledge, refined over generations of building and surveying, their living textbook. But the geometry goes deeper than square corners. The whole pyramid is a study in proportion. The ratio of its perimeter to its height is close to 2 times pi. The slope of its sides creates triangles that hold the golden ratio. Now, whether those constants were put there on purpose or are just a beautiful byproduct of their chosen proportions, that's debated. But the result is clear. The structure has a harmonic quality, a visual stability that feels correct. It wasn't random. It came from a long tradition of sacred geometry, where certain shapes and ratios were thought to hold cosmic power, to resonate with the order of the universe. For these builders, mathematics wasn't separate from spirituality. It was the bridge. Calculating the correct angle for a ramp was a practical problem, but choosing a slope that reflected a divine proportion, that made the ramp a ceremonial pathway. The precision of the base square was an engineering necessity, but achieving that square through celestial alignment and perfect right angles turned the foundation into a sacred diagram. Their geometry was proprietary. Guarded knowledge of the priestly class because it was so powerful. It let them do the impossible, freeze a moment of celestial alignment into a permanent, mountainous form. That mathematical foundation shows something crucial. The pyramid isn't a brute force achievement, it's a calculated one. Every part from the vast footprint to the soaring apex was governed by a system, integrated measurement and ratio. The tools were simple cords, rods, sighting instruments, but the minds using them were thinking in abstract relationships, in angles and proportions that went beyond the immediate task. They were solving problems in multiple dimensions at once. Making sure the structure would be sound, symbolically potent, astronomically faithful. The silent stones we see now are the final answer to a series of complex geometric questions. Solved under the burning sun, dust on their hands, the imperishable stars in their minds, that perfect alignment didn't last forever. The sky was turning. There's a wobble in the Earth's rotation, a slow one. It takes 26,000 years to go all the way around. That's precession. The north celestial pole drifts in a circle against the stars. So Polaris, our pole star now, wasn't the guide back then. For the pyramid builders 4,500 years ago, it was a different star. In Draco, was the one that sat almost still at the center of the turning sky. Their whole method, watching those circumpolar stars and that was set up for a specific arrangement in the heavens. And that arrangement was only truly perfect for a short time. A few decades, maybe a century. That's the complication inside their success. They were aiming at a moving target, using a map that was drifting. So the slight deviation we see in the Great Pyramid's alignment, that tiny fraction of a degree, it might not be a mistake. It could be a timestamp, a frozen moment in that slow drift. If they aligned it perfectly to their pole star and we measure it against true north today, the difference tells a story. It tells us when they looked. It turns the pyramid from a static thing into a kind of clock. Can take that misalignment, factor in the known rate of precession and work backwards. Calculate the year they made their observations. It's a staggering thought. The stones themselves are recording an astronomical event. They hold a memory of the night sky from 2500 BCE. That means later pyramids built centuries after should show a slightly different alignment following the pole as it drifted. And some evidence says they do. Their precision is a double-edged sword. It shows their mastery, but it also shows their moment in history. They locked their work to a heaven that was, in cosmic terms, already leaving them behind. Their triumph was to capture that fleeting perfection. In millions of tons of enduring stone, the pole star drifts. That's precession. It's not just a curiosity, it's a key. If the builders aligned their pyramids to true north using the stars, and the stars themselves were moving, then every pyramid is a snapshot. It's frozen. It captures the sky at the moment its builders looked up. So the slight misalignments we see aren't failures, they're signatures. And one researcher saw a pattern in them. It changed how we might date these monuments. Egyptologist Kate Spence looked at the data. The precise orientation errors of multiple pyramids across different reigns. She noticed something systematic. The pyramids weren't all off by random amounts. Their deviations plotted a curve that matched the predictable drift of the celestial pole over centuries. Her hypothesis was elegant. The builders were using that simultaneous transit method. They were lining up two stars and to find north. But as the pole drifted, the perfect vertical alignment of those two stars occurred at slightly different times each year. To get a perfectly true north-south line, you had to observe on the exact night when that alignment pointed directly to the celestial pole. Miss that perfect night by a few decades, and your alignment would be off. A tiny amount, but measurable. Spence calculated backwards. Using the known rate of precession, she worked out when that perfect alignment would have occurred for the Great Pyramid of Khufu. The date she arrived at was around 2467 BCE. What's remarkable is that this astronomical date fits neatly within the range suggested by historical and archaeological evidence. But the real proof is in the pattern. Pyramids built just before Khufu's, like the step pyramid of, show a slight error in one direction. Pyramids built after, like those of and at Giza, show a slight error in the opposite direction. Their orientations trace the path of the drifting pole star, like a series of arrows pointing at a moving target. This isn't just a clever theory, it's a powerful, independent check. It gives us a way to date these structures using the immutable laws of celestial mechanics, separate from fragmentary king lists or pottery styles. The pyramid's alignment becomes its own birth certificate, carved not in ink but in stone and starlight. Spence's work shows the pyramids were more than tombs. They are time capsules in the most literal sense. Their very tilt against the modern north encodes the exact era of their creation. They hold within their geometry a memory of the night sky, a specific configuration of stars that hasn't existed for over 4. When we measure that fraction of a degree today, we're not just measuring stone, we're reading a moment. The moment an ancient astronomer stood on a dusty plateau, looked up at the silent turning of N, and said, "Here, mark it here." This is the way to eternity. That slight drift in alignment isn't a mistake, it's a clue. But to read it, you have to look beyond Giza, because not all pyramids point north with that same accuracy. Step Pyramid of at Saqqara, the very first of the giant stone pyramids, it's noticeably less precise. Its sides deviate from true north by several degrees. That's not a small margin. You could see that shift with the naked eye. Then there's the Red Pyramid built by Khufu's father. Its alignment error is even more pronounced. These aren't failures, they're data points. And when you plot them on a timeline, a story of development starts to emerge. The Step Pyramid was a revolutionary leap. A bold experiment in stone. Its builders were pioneers, figuring out the rules as they went. Their celestial observations were probably less refined. Their methods for transferring that alignment to the ground, they were still being worked out. So you get a structure of profound importance but with a less perfect orientation. It's a first draft in stone. By the time built the Red Pyramid, techniques had advanced, but the quest for the perfect pyramid form was still. His builders were experimenting with slopes, with internal structures, and maybe the sheer ambition of those projects meant the meticulous, time-consuming stellar alignment process. Sometimes it was compromised, for speed or for stability. Then comes the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid. Then, here the alignment errors shrink to almost nothing. This is the apex, the culmination of a century of frantic innovation, trial and error. The method of the circumpolar stars, the use of the Merkhet and water trenches, the geometric checks, all of it was perfected, applied with a relentless discipline. Giza represents a brief golden window, where organizational power, technical knowledge, and theological imperative align perfectly. It was a high-water mark, but the story doesn't end there. Pyramids built in the centuries after Giza, they often show a return to less precise alignments. The knowledge wasn't entirely lost. But the obsessive rigor, the societal focus, the resource allocation required to hit that level of perfection, it may have faded. Priorities shifted. The perfect method, it seems, was a peak that couldn't be sustained indefinitely. This comparative view, it's humbling. It frames the Giza pyramids not as the inevitable standard of ancient Egypt, but as a spectacular anomaly. A testament to what was possible when a culture directed its full genius toward a single cosmic goal. For a few generations, the stones themselves tell us that such precision was hard-won, it was fleeting, and ultimately it was a choice. The stones were measured, but the ground was made sacred first. For the Egyptians, there was no separation between the engineering and the religious act. The precision of their alignment, that was a form of devotion. And we find this in the oldest religious writings we have, the pyramid texts. These aren't records or manuals, they're incantations. Spells carved into burial chambers starting in the late 5th dynasty, right after the Giza pyramids were built. Their purpose was to guide the pharaoh's spirit on the journey to the imperishable stars. They describe an ascent, a merging with the sun god, a transformation into an eternal light among the circumpolar stars, the same stars used for alignment. So when an astronomer priest sighted, and he wasn't just taking a measurement, he was tracing the pharaoh's future path, mapping a route to heaven. The technical act was a physical prayer. This sacred context leads to a ceremony, one that likely began every major project, the stretching of the cord. In temple reliefs you see the pharaoh with the goddess, the deity of writing and measurement. They hold a cord stretching it between two stakes. This was the ceremonial start of the surveying. The pharaoh, as divine ruler and patroness of precision, weren't just marking the land. They were invoking divine sanction for the work. Infusing that first line, the line that would become the pyramid's north-south axis, with cosmic power. The ritual turned the surveyor's cord from a tool into a conduit for the will of the gods. It declared the geometry to follow was holy geometry. This fusion is key. For us, it's tempting to separate the ritual from the technology, to see the ceremony as superstition and the stellar alignment as pure science. But for the Egyptians, these were two sides of the same coin. The alignment had to be astronomically correct because the gods lived in a mathematically ordered cosmos. A mistake in the stars was an offense to the divine order. The ritual provided the spiritual authority. The meticulous method ensured that authority was executed flawlessly in the physical world. One without the other was unthinkable. The technical method was never the end goal. It was the means to a spiritual end, the eternal recycling of the royal soul within the machinery of the heavens. That perfect north-south line wasn't just an achievement. It was a covenant, written in stone and starlight between the king and the universe. The Great Pyramid's precision isn't something the ancients claimed, it's something we measure now. We have tools they never imagined, satellites, lasers, GPS, all of them aimed at Giza. And they all say the same thing. The data is clear. The west side of Khufu's pyramid points to true north with an error of just 3/60ths of a degree. To picture that, if you ran that side out for a mile, it would wander off by less than the width of your hand. That's not an estimate, it's a fact from the best surveying tech we have. So the mystery isn't if they did it. The satellites show they did. The question is how. That's where modern tests come in. An engineer, Glenn Dash, decided to try the ancient methods, not just talk about them. He went out with simple tools, a wooden rod, some cord, a plumb bob. He wanted to see if the circumpolar star method, using and, could really hit that Giza accuracy. The work was careful. On a clear night, he marked the star's vertical line like an ancient priest would. He transferred that line to the ground with a basic Merkhet and bay. Then he measured his result with modern gear. The outcome was significant. His simple star-based line had an error of about 1/12 of a degree. That's even than the Great Pyramid. His experiment, run several times, showed something important. The Egyptian technique wasn't just possible. It was more than enough to create the precision in the stone. This modern test closes a loop of 4,500 years. It connects our questions to their skill. For a long time, the pyramid's alignment could seem like a solitary wonder, almost magical. But when a researcher today can match that precision using the same principles, it changes the story. It moves things from guesswork into something you can repeat. It shows the builders had a clear, teachable method. Their genius wasn't in some lost technology. It was in mastering what they had, their eyes, their knowledge of the sky, their commitment to a geometric ideal. The stones kept their secret for ages. Now our tools confirm what their work always said. They knew exactly what they were doing. That precision has, over time, created another kind of story, where the explanation isn't human. It's a story of lost technologies, of visitors from the stars. And that idea is compelling in its own way. It offers a kind of shortcut to wonder, a mystery too great for the people of the past. But to accept that story is to do something. It's to erase the actual people who did the work, to dismiss their intellect, their culture, their generations of skill. So it's worth looking at these myths directly, not with anger but with clarity. The evidence for how the pyramids were built and aligned, it's here, on Earth. It's in the archaeological record. We have the tools, copper chisels worn down from cutting limestone, dolerite pounding stones, their surfaces rounded from use. We have the workers' settlement, the bakeries that fed them, administrative records detailing their rations. We've found the quarries with blocks still partially cut, showing the exact methods. And we've replicated the stellar alignment with simple tools and achieved that same accuracy. The methods aren't just plausible, They're demonstrable. And the cultural context, the pyramid texts, the ritual of stretching the cord, it all gives you the why. This wasn't a random act of engineering. It was a sacred national project, driven by a cosmology that linked the pharaoh's destiny to the orderly motion of the stars. To say it needed outside help is to misunderstand human innovation. It ignores the timeline we can see in the stones themselves. The trial and error at Saqqara and the gradual refinement that culminated in the perfection at Giza. Human history is about people solving immense problems with the tools they have, passing that knowledge down, building on it. The ancient Egyptians were masters of that. They observed the natural world with exquisite care, the flow of water that always finds level, the predictable cycles of the sun and stars, and they harnessed those principles on a monumental scale. Debunking the myth of aliens isn't about shutting down imagination. It's about redirecting awe to its rightful place. The wonder isn't less when you understand it was human hands and minds, it's more. The true marvel is that people 4,500 years ago organized themselves, planned with decades-long vision, and executed a work of such precision that it still defines what we think is possible. That story, the human story, is far more extraordinary. It grants the ancient Egyptians the full credit. For one of humanity's most audacious and enduring achievements, that celestial precision, it needed more than brilliant minds. It needed a civilization. We look at the Great Pyramid as this solitary wonder, but it's really a symptom. The visible result of a social machine, an organizational machine of staggering complexity. You have to think of the chain. At the top, the pharaoh, the vizier, the sponsors. Then the master architect, the high priest of astronomy, the followers of Horus. Below them, the specialized foremen, the scribes, the engineers, and then the workforce. The skilled masons, the haulers, the laborers. For the alignment to hold that single perfect line from the stars, it had to travel down the entire chain, without distortion. The master surveyor's instruction on a still night, mark it here, had to become an immutable command etched across miles. It had to be understood by the foreman laying out the water trenches for leveling. It had to guide the quarry boss shaping the cornerstone. It had to be felt by the mason setting the final casing stone, high on the slope, decades later. That transmission of intent across time through thousands of hands that might be the greater miracle. It speaks to a society with a shared vocabulary of precision, where a cubit wasn't just a forearm's length. It was a sacred, standardized unit enforced by the state. Where training was so thorough a worker knew his task implicitly. We see glimpses in the record. The workers' town at Giza had bakeries producing thousands of loaves a day. Breweries, fish processing stations, infirmaries. This wasn't a slave camp. It was a planned community for a skilled, rotating workforce. Scribes kept meticulous records, on papyrus on limestone flakes, rations of bread and beer, tools issued, work gangs named for the pharaoh's glory like Friends of Khufu. That bureaucracy was the nervous system. It made sure the man aligning the sighting rod and the man hauling a 10-ton block were part of the same organism, working toward the same geometrically perfect end. So the alignment is a testament to social cohesion. It required a population that believed in the work's divine purpose, and an administration that could harness that belief into coordinated, precise action for a generation. The stones are aligned because the society itself was aligned, in purpose, in hierarchy, in its unwavering focus on a goal that outlived every individual who worked on it. That level of long-term mobilization, we still struggle to comprehend it. It reveals a state power so absolute and a cultural vision so compelling, it could bend the daily lives of thousands toward a single celestial point for decades. The pyramid's true north, in the end, it's a direction pointed by a collective will. The desert air was as important as any tool. That clear, dry atmosphere let them see the stars without any haze. They could follow, and with a sharpness we'd find hard to match now. But that was only part of it. The whole operation moved to the rhythm of the natural world, specifically the Nile. The annual flood was what drove everything. When the river rose, it covered the farmland. All the farming work stopped. That meant you had a huge seasonal workforce, people who could be directed to state projects like building a pyramid. The heaviest construction, moving those massive core blocks, probably happened during these months, and the river became a transport highway. Barges could carry stone from the quarries right to the base of the plateau on the high water, so the work calendar wasn't year-round. It was this ancient symbiotic dance. The clear skies for observing, the flooded fields for labor, the high river for transport, all of it had to line up for the work to move forward. That seasonal rhythm means the starting ceremony, The stretching of the cord was probably timed too. They wouldn't have done it on any random night. The Egyptians were careful about auspicious moments. The ceremony likely matched a specific astronomical event, a holy day, or the rising of a star like Sirius, which signaled the flood was coming. That would tie the pyramid's very beginning to the land's cycle of renewal. So that first perfect line in the sand was a record. A snapshot of a specific arrangement of stars at a sacred time of year. But that line was just the start of a conversation. A pyramid took decades to finish. The master surveyor who set the original alignment wouldn't live to see the capstone set. So the question is, how did they make sure the 10th course of stones, laid 15 years later, was still perfectly oriented? The alignment wasn't a one-time thing. It was a living standard that had to be maintained. They certainly set permanent markers deep into the bedrock, stone benchmarks or copper pins at the exact corners of the base. Those were the fixed points every foreman would use, but even those could get buried or disturbed by the construction. So the process needed periodic rechecking. At key stages, maybe after each major tier was done, the astronomer priests would come back. On a clear night, they'd set up their Merkhets and sighting tools again. They'd sight the same circumpolar stars, checking the growing structure against the original celestial plan. It was a dynamic, ongoing calibration. They were building a machine meant to last for eternity, so they couldn't allow any cumulative drift. A tiny error repeated over 20 courses would become a visible flaw. This need for constant checking changes how you see the project. It wasn't like setting a house foundation and then just building up. The pyramid grew in a dialogue with the sky. Each phase of stone was an answer to the question, are we still true? The work was a marathon of precision. The finish line was decades away and the only constant was the guiding stars. That conversation with the sky kept going, long after the pyramids were finished. The same drive to tie architecture to the cosmos stayed at the heart of Egyptian building for thousands of years. You see it in the great temples like Karnak. Their main axis lines up precisely. Not to the North Star, but to the rising sun on the winter solstice. On that shortest day, the sun would rise right down the central path. It would flood the deepest sanctuary with light. It was a different alignment, solar, not stellar, but it came from the same place. The temple was a machine for capturing a moment of divine power, for turning the sun's rebirth into an architectural event. That shift from stars to sun shows the knowledge evolving, the methods changed. But the principle stayed the same. They were still using the sky as their blueprint, still turning celestial events into sacred geometry on the ground. And this idea to harmonize buildings with the cosmos, that thread runs far beyond Egypt. It shows up all over the world. In Britain, the stones of Stonehenge line up with the summer solstice sunrise. In the Americas, the Maya oriented their pyramids to the movements of Venus and the sun. The ancestral built structures to mark solar and lunar extremes. These aren't accidents. They point to a shared recognition that the orderly cycles of the sky reflected a deeper order. A cosmic stability people wanted to mirror in their most important places. In that global picture, what Egypt did stands out. Not because it was unique, but because it was so early and so sophisticated and executed on such a scale. They were among the first to codify this celestial relationship, to turn it into a repeatable, precise engineering practice. Using simple tools to get that accuracy set a standard. It showed that aligning with the cosmos wasn't just symbolic, it was a technical discipline. One that needed deep observational knowledge, meticulous planning, and a society that could hold that vision across generations. So the legacy of that Giza precision goes two ways. One direction, it flows forward through history, influencing later monumental architecture in a direct line of tradition. The other way, it stands as a powerful, independent example, an example of a universal human pursuit. When you look at an Egyptian temple aligned to the solstice sun, or a Mayan observatory tracking Venus, you're seeing different expressions of the same urge. To find our place in the universe by building markers that resonate with its rhythms. The silent, north-pointing pyramid might be the early statement of that. A statement so perfectly executed it still commands respect, and still challenges us to understand the minds that could conceive such a permanent celestial anchor. The pyramids had this outer skin, a shell of polished white limestone from the quarries, and it wasn't just for show. Those casing stones were the real test of their precision. Each one was cut to exact angles, ground smooth, and fitted against the next with joints so tight you couldn't slip a blade in. That was the final check. If the core underneath all those millions of rough blocks was even a little out of alignment, they never could have laid these perfect panels. The casing would have shown every flaw, but the stones slid into place. They made that seamless slope, and their mirrored surfaces did more than catch the sun. They made the pyramid's geometry visible. Each smooth face, rising from the desert, was a physical statement. It turned an abstract line in the sky into something solid, something you could see. The casing was the last word, a long argument between human ambition and the stars. And for centuries that white surface stood there, a silent, shining record of a standard that started with a plumb line hanging in the dark. Even with everything we think we know, the stones still hold a few secrets. We have the general principle, the circumpolar stars method, but the specifics for each pyramid, they're still debated. For pyramid, which exact pair of stars did the surveyors use? Was it the same as his father's? The sky was drifting, so the perfect alignment would have shifted just slightly. Pinpointing the exact celestial markers for each monument, it's like trying to find the right page in a star catalog that's gone. So now researchers use archaeoastronomy software, sophisticated models of the ancient sky with incredible precision. They can rewind the stars to any date, any hour, see what configurations were possible. This digital sky gazing lets them test different star pairs against the known alignment errors of each pyramid, searching for the celestial fingerprint that matches the stone. Then there's the physical challenge of the site itself. We understand the concept, stretching a cord between two stakes to create a baseline. But the Great Pyramid's base is a square of immense proportions. How did they ensure the diagonals, running from corner to corner across that vast distance, were perfectly equal? Equal diagonals are the ultimate proof of a perfect square. With simple chords over 200 meters, the potential for error was enormous, from sagging or temperature changes. Some researchers suggest a central datum point, a fixed pin from which all four corners were measured out radially, like drawing a circle and then marking the square within it. Others propose a system of continuous rechecking, a network of control lines that cross-referenced each other. The truth is, we don't have their engineering manual. We only have the flawless result. This is where modern technology becomes a time machine. Teams are now using high-resolution 3D laser scanning to map every surface of the pyramids. These scans capture details down to the millimeter, revealing subtle patterns in the stonework invisible to the eye. They can detect if one course of blocks is very slightly out of plane with the one below it, which might tell us about their construction sequencing, how they maintained the alignment as they built upward. Was the outer casing built course by course with the core, or added at the very end as a final skin? The scan data holds clues. Alongside the scanners, experimental archaeologists take tools into the field. They build scale models using only replicated ancient equipment, copper chisels, dolerite hammers, flax cords, wooden sighting tools. They try different techniques for laying out those massive squares, for checking diagonals, for transferring a level line across a trench. Each failed attempt teaches them what doesn't work, narrowing the path to what does. This hands-on research breathes life into the theories. It reminds us these were physical problems solved by people with aching muscles and dust in their eyes, not abstract equations on a screen. Every new scan, every software model, every experimental build peels back a layer. But instead of finding a simple answer at the center, we often find more refined questions. This is the true nature of the pyramids. They are not static puzzles waiting for a single, final solution. They are active collaborators in a dialogue across time. They present a problem crafted by ancient minds, and they challenge modern minds to solve it with a different kind of toolset. In that ongoing conversation, the distinction between ancient and modern blurs. The shared goal is the same, to understand a standard of excellence so high it continues to define what human ingenuity can achieve. The casing stones weren't just a final check. They were the expression of a system. And that system, this precise, repeatable method of stellar alignment, it makes you reconsider a question. What does it mean to call something science? We tend to define science by labs, by papers, by a separation from belief. The Egyptian approach challenges that. Their work was a different kind of science. It was integrated with culture, with cosmology, but it was systematic, it was brilliant. It was a rigorous, observation-based process. It was about understanding the natural world to achieve a specific monumental goal. Every clear night tracking, and that was data collection. Recording the stars' positions, noting the drift over years, that was astronomy. taking that celestial data and using a plumb line, a sighting rod, to translate it into a line on the ground. That was applied mathematics, that was physics, creating a level plane across acres of bedrock using water in trenches. That was material science. That was engineering. Each step was a link, cause and effect, hypothesis and verification. They had a question: how do we anchor a sacred machine to the imperishable realm? They developed a method to answer it. They tested it through repetition. They refined it over generations. You can see the improving alignments from Saqqara to Giza. This wasn't guesswork, it was a cumulative technical tradition. And recognizing this changes the image. They weren't just monument builders, they were proto-scientists. Master engineers. Their priests were researchers. Their construction sites were open-air laboratories. Their success wasn't just a finished building. It was a building that met an astronomically precise specification. This achievement is a counterpoint. It argues against the idea that rigorous, systematic thinking about the world is a purely modern invention. It shows the deep roots of scientific inquiry in antiquity. Their science wore a different face. It wasn't pursued for its own abstract sake. It was in service to a spiritual imperative. But the discipline required, the attention to empirical evidence, the development of repeatable techniques, these are the hallmarks of a scientific mindset. So the pyramid isn't a relic of superstition. It's a testament to an ancient, holistic science, where measuring the stars and ensuring a pharaoh's journey were two parts of the same equation. That dialogue with the universe left a mark in the stone. The pyramids, their precise alignment to the north. It's more than just a technical detail, it's a statement about what people can do. For a long time, we've looked for the secret, the lost technology, the shortcut that explains that kind of perfection. But the truth is actually more powerful. It wasn't magic, it wasn't a mystery, it was a chain of mastery. That chain started with someone just looking up, watching the stars that never set, and it ended with a mountain of polished limestone. Each link in that chain was a choice. The choice to watch the natural world and to watch it closely. The choice to build a repeatable method from what you saw. The choice to organize a whole society around doing that method with discipline for generations. You see it from the silent circumpolar stars to the Merkhet's plumb line, from the ritual of stretching the cord to the last casing stone. A civilization in dialogue with the universe. They didn't see the cosmos as something distant or indifferent. They saw it as a grand, ordered machine. And they found a way to anchor their greatest work to its very axis. That's the ultimate marriage, cosmic ambition and earthly precision. Their legacy isn't just about scale or how long it's lasted. It's a legacy of intention. It shows what human hands and minds can do, with simple tools and a deep understanding. They could make something that resonates with the fundamental order of things. That resonance is why the pyramids still hold us. They're not just relics of a forgotten past. They're active monuments to a timeless human potential. When we look at them, we're not just looking at tombs, we're looking at a testament to what humanity can achieve, with focused observation, with relentless patience, with a unifying purpose. They stand there as a silent question for every future generation. A question about what we choose to build and what truths we choose to align ourselves with.